So thank you for joining me today, checking combine losses and what's going on, how to find out where them losses are coming from. We don't have to take a whole lot of time to talk about how to diminish them losses, because that's never ending. We'll touch on a couple things, but we've bought the best seed, best fertilizer program, best herbicide program we can get, and now it's time to combine it. So it only makes sense to get every kernel that we can up into our grain tank. So to get started, the very first thing a guy's gonna do is go out into the field, and you're gonna look if you had a weather event or something. You're gonna check field loss before your combine to get your baseline or your zero set. So we look out here, there's no kernels on the ground, everything looks really good. So the next step is we come behind the head. We come behind the head and we're going to look around, and the big thing here is your feet. There's your square foot. You just connect the dots. There's your square foot roughly, and we're going to look around. Do we see any kernels? No, we see zero kernels, and it's a little unfair because I'm using Lexion, so it's a little unfair, but it is what I got to work with. But had we had a row crop head, corn head, you would look next to them stalks. Are we getting a lot of kernels? Do we have a little trickle of corn next to each row? If so, is it something that we can slow our feeder house down? Can we slow the head down? Can we close our deck plates up a little bit? Things like that, and to eliminate some of that butt shelling or whatever's causing our header loss. Same with beans. You can look at the row on the beans, and you can see if you got a bunch of beans right there at the row. On soybeans, a big part of it could be the pods are right at your sickle height, and as the sickle cuts, it just shatters the pods. But we still need to check behind the head, in front of the head to get our zero, behind the head to see if anything's changed. So nothing behind the head has really changed. All right, for losses out the back, I like to keep my spinner spreaders on the shoe going because it separates it from our chaff coming off of our rotor. You always drop off your rotor, the rear of the combine, always drop that into a windrow so you can see it. On older walker machines, if you can't do it, on my 8820 coming off the walkers, then you simply followed your chopper pattern out to cover the swath behind the combine, and your shoe on them old combines dropped into the windrow. So it was the opposite, but the same theory. You kept them separate. So we've got our swath there. We'll comb through the swath to see if we're getting loss off the rotors, and then we look with the spinners. So what I like there is we know we have zero behind the head. So when we come out anywhere in this gap from our tire to the head here, if we come anywhere in here, we can look for losses, and we see none. But the other thing I like to really make an exaggeration is when you stop and let the combine clean out, you get the chaffer here on the ground right off our spinner spreaders. You get that little bit of material there, and then we can comb through it. You know, you can sift through it and look for any grain. And again, you'll never find a kernel, but bear with me here, bad demonstration. So we comb through from that pattern and see, and so if there is a little bit of a loss, by stopping here, it's really going to exaggerate it to help us find that loss. But when we walk out here, whoop, we got to go this way because we haven't traveled there yet. So we go back here, get a nice clean spot. It's easy to see the ground. We have no losses. Then we come over to our windrow. Normally you'd take your hands, I'm going to use my feet for example, and you toss it. You don't just gently lift it up, you toss it up, kick it out of the way, so if there's any trapped kernels in that row, hopefully you knock them down. And of course, good luck. So we would dig around, and again, you put your feet at a square, you connect the dot to your feet, and that's your square foot. All right, so we kick our windrow, we fluff our windrow around, and we end up, let's say we find a few kernels, so we know it's from the separating system. So we use our app. So the grain in there is a lot different in that windrow than the grain being broadcast if the chopper was up. And so we use an app, and it tells us this width of head with this chassis says 10 kernels per square foot is 1 bushel lost in the windrow. And so then we can just use the app itself. For me, it's an app from Claas, and then you can optimize, and it will help you find your losses. Now out here where it's broadcast, that number is going to be a lot less per square foot to make a bushel, because you're covering a lot more square feet. And so out here it might only be 2, 3, 4, 5 kernels to make a bushel per square foot. And so if we're getting loss off of the rotors, off of our separating system, very first thing I would do is pull back on the stick. Let's slow our roll a little bit till we get this thing under control, and then maybe speed up our separating system, and then we can start to work back on our ground speed. Very rarely are people way too aggressive on their separating, but so then you can start working back on your ground speed. If no matter what you're doing on the separating side, you can't stop them losses, then you go to thrashing, because separating is just that. It's there just to separate the chaff from the grain. It's just tumbling it and tossing it. Our thrashing system is what does the thrashing. So if we're getting way too much loss out the back, we look at our losses on our straw quality. Do we still have grain in the heads on our plant, or on the cob? Do we still have chunks of kernels on the cob? And so then we know, okay, we got to get a lot more aggressive on our thrashing to help our separating side out. Pretty simple there. On the shoe has a lot going on from field to field. Maybe one field was more drought stressed or late planted, early frost, and the other field didn't get hit. So you can come out of one field, go into the next field, and have tremendous loss because its test weight is light and your fan is literally just blowing it right out the back. Or your shoe, I'm saying shoe upper and lower chaffer sieve combination together. If your shoe is too tight, you're going to send a lot of grain through returns, you're going to increase your chance of grain damage, and you're really going to increase your chance of loss out the back. On the flip side, if it's way too open, you have zero coming through the returns, you have a lot of crap coming with your clean grain, so you got a dirty grain tank sample, like in soybeans or corn, you got a lot of cob, or you got a lot of unthrashed pods in there. And so then you got to find that balance between being too tight to where you're really pulling your miles an hour down, or you're super sensitive to any going uphill, or too far open where you're getting too much crap in the grain tank. But at the same time, if your shoe is set right, but you don't have enough wind, you can actually get loss on that top deck, because you'll see it in your grain tank, is that the chaff will start coming in the grain tank as well. So it'll look dirty, and your first instinct is going to be to close that down, but you're already high on losses, and as soon as you close it down, your losses are just skyrocketing. That's because you don't have enough wind, and that mat, instead of floating, all that chaff is supposed to float above the screen deck and out the back, and the grain fall down. Well, now that mat is on the screen deck, and it's mixing with the grain, and it's carrying the grain right out the back. And so guys, I know I went really fast through this, but one, I got to get back to work, and two, because it's that fast. It is that quick to just simply check in front of your header, behind the header, and then behind your shoe and behind your separating, and you can really dial in the combine. And by the time you get losses maximized, there's a really good chance that your grain tank by nature is going to somewhat improve if you had a bad loss situation. Not always, but there's a good chance. And so it depends how you're getting it. But use your owner's manual. Use the app that your company, that your brand offers to help optimize these combines, because they got apps for optimizing your thrashing and just overall productivity as well. and utilize your dealer support to help you out on that too. And so on that note, let's get back to work, guys. Thanks for watching.